Right then guys, I'm going to go through some floor work. So some 1990 stuff, get stuck into the hips and start to get some feedback. Alright, so hit the deck if you want to follow along. Obviously you can start, stop, whatever this vid as you go. So from there we're going to start with some switches. In terms of our setup, beauty of going in the 1990 is we can stimulate the deeper stuff of the hip. Okay, so we can create this layering effect. And especially by taking things out downstream, like the foot and ankle, if that's not moving too well. Say we're squatting, that can really, or lunging, really inhibit the ability to get into this stuff around the hip and load it really well. Okay, obviously there's similar stuff we could do for foot and ankle. Then we bring the stuff that we stimulated now into that squatting pattern, allowing us to get more out of those squats. So we'll start with some hinges, switches, all right, to get things moving. So in terms of your setup, try not to get too much of this going on through the torso, okay? Think upstream, downstream does matter, all right? So from there you can start to lateralize things, okay, simply by pushing back this way a little bit, keeping that torso organized. Use your kickstands, all right? Use your hands and arms. That is not cheating. From there, peel what is now your lead leg off the floor. Start to pull over the top. And try and keep the same sort of pace, whatever tempo you pick. This is just a guide through this movement. Try and keep the pace the same throughout, all right? So now we're starting to keep some tension through here, deep at the hip. Try and feel for if you say you're going no hands and you're starting to get this, you get to here and you're trying to budge over the top and then you speed up a bit, got through it. That's probably a case of we're trying to bite off a bit more than we can chew at the moment. So we've got to lateralize it, give ourselves a little bit more room. Start to move through a range at the hips that we own, all right? We'll go a couple more. So start to imagine, if you can, these knees are allergic to each other. So that could be, we start to pull here, and then this one really wants to come with, and we say got a small amount of space here and here, but that's okay, work with what you've got. Try and create this pulling effect through here, as you almost resist through here at the moment. Then start to pull this one towards the floor. We can alter this position a little bit. We'll go one more rep each way. Just start to close it off just a little bit. All right? We'll go one more. So again, for some of you guys that have got, say, a bit more mobility, let's say, pull off, pull off, pull off. Keep pushing this into the floor a little bit. Then really bring it with. But again, you can apply the same cues even if those knees are a bit closer together. Yeah, it's working with what we've got, establishing that baseline first and foremost. Right, so after those few switches, from there, we'll get stuck into our sideline hip cart. So I'm going to go bang, bang, to try and lock my torso in place. I'll make sure I've got my marks free. Then I'm going to pull up into flexion. Then I'm going to open up. From there then, I'm going to try and create this rotation at the hip and just tease that out as I pull the knee down towards the other knee. Probably notice as we go second rep, as you open up the hip and you pull down towards the other knee, we don't get too much extension back here. So we don't have to try and throw it back here. It's going to be a lot of lower back. Open the hip up. Pull round and down. Almost imagine that heel just lagging behind a little bit. Then we'll go the other way. So open the hip up. Pull over the top. and down. Pull back into extension. Open the hip up. And all this time I would stay here and here. This stops me opening up through here or dragging this with as much. Let's go one more. You can do if you want, if you've got the option at home of like a light kettlebell. Coming in, locking in place off of that. So handle here, hand here. We'll go one more rep. I mean, if you've done 3, you can stop, start and go to the other side. And then we'll do exactly the same on the other side. So again, if you've got, say, that object, kettlebell, bang, bang, lock this in place. Little bit of a radiation, tension off of that. Pull up into flexion. And what we can do now is, as we're moving through this rotation of the hip, is we can start to irradiate through the rest of the body a little bit more maybe. So maybe I'll go here and here. Start to just create a little bit more tension through that upper body. Because when we do this often is we'll feel this start to work harder. Because we get some good feedback on what the rest of the body is doing. Is it getting involved where we don't want it to get involved? Am I opening up through here? As we pull down towards the floor into extension, am I getting stuck right into here? Little tuck of the pelvis at the bottom. Just try and push that knee back a little bit. Then go again. How many reps we've done now? And then we'll go 3 the other way. So you imagine heel just lagging towards the ceiling, or up towards the ceiling. Pull over the top. And again, if your hip rotation, as you start to call yourself out on other parts of the body getting involved, you say here, little bit of abduction. Then we feel like we're starting to go here. Pause there. Really try and control this opening up of the hip. Maybe instead of going here, we now keep that chest facing straight across the floor. Little tuck of the pelvis. And we're working more through here. Maybe here. We'll go one more. Open up. Open that hip up. Pull up into flexion. Again, think nice and tall through the upper body. And now we'll hit that 90-90 again, Fles. We'll go for some Pales rails. So, from there, we'll go lead leg first. So we're going to go a little bit of external rotation. Alright, so this being external, this being internal. If you could see me stood up, doing that hip rotation that we just did, obviously the external part here isn't really an option when we're down on the deck. But if you were to do it from standing, you can start to see how much external rotation you have access to, well, in hip flexion anyway, and internal rotation. Alright, so internal, external, fundamental movement of your hip. Alright, if this is lacking, we're going to find it hard to get a lot out of movements, alright, that involve a lot of movement at the hip, or maybe not a lot of movement, but being able to load the hip effectively and efficiently. So from there, we're going to think about bowing the stretch to begin with. So pushing your butt back to whatever it is behind you. Belly button is pulling forward. Then we start to create this relative movement at the hip. One bone relative to another. As you've done that, bum that way, belly button that way, you might have just felt this stuff through here starting to lengthen. This stuff through here starting to wind up and shorten a little bit. So we start to feel the deeper stuff of the hip start to get our attention. What I could do in the 90-90, you often see is like people start to pancake. We will do that in a video to come, but at the moment we want to target the really deep stuff first. So we're talking micro movements. From there then, what we can start to do is we can either stay here for, say, around about 2 minutes and focus on your breathing. So you want a slightly longer exhale. This is the stretch component. All right, so you can start to scan the stretch. Think about little rotations here having a big effect on loading at that deep level. All right, so we don't need big movement. Think about what's going on through here rather than here. From there then, if you feel like a real pinch, for example in here, then we want to back off a little bit. All right, lateralize it a little bit. A lot of people are going to be sort of more here with kickstand in play, all right, to allow us to get into an effective position where we can keep torso as organized as possible without a lot of this going on, all right. And then we can also, so while I'm rambling, getting good work done in the passive stretch, all right. So you guys carry on trying to search and load that while I just give you these options. You're pulling the knee up if you want to, so that trail leg, we can take some tension out of here. All right. From there then, if you can get your hand under here, so there, and it'll go under easy. Then get a shoe or an ab mat if you've got one, excelente, or a book or something like this. Anything that feels comfortable for you, okay, so you don't have to force the knee down to the floor. All right, so it might be sat here like that. You're like, dude, that's what I got. Pop something underneath there. All right, give yourself some feedback. You'll see why in a minute. So under this knee here. From there then, you spent 2 minutes searching and loading that stretch. Okay, so that passive element, which we wouldn't want to do if we're about to do, say, a WOD. So we're about to do either something where we move quickly, or we're going to lift something heavy, or do, say, lots of reps. We wouldn't want to do the passive element directly before that. All right, you would do these active elements or parts of this that we're going to do now. All right, so you might be like, dude, that was passive. Yeah, that's the passive loading, so we can differentiate between what we're going to do now. So now you're going to start to push this foot down through the floor this way. Okay, so I'm going to go here and here, set myself up so I get a bit more feedback. And I'm going to start to pull my foot down through the floor this way. Once I've done that, at about 30% effort, let's say, I'm going to take this knee and I'm going to start to try and push it down through the floor. So you're going to keep this length that you found, that stretch, as you start to add some tension to it. There's a reason why we ramp this slowly, is because we just lengthen this stuff back here. We don't want to go 3, 2, 1, bang, and bore into it, because we're going to get chucked out of that range, okay, as a protective mechanism. Likelihood is we can't handle a lot of force here, so we ramp it slowly so we can get some good work done in a range and start to tease out the ability to be strong there. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, is there this much chatting in every, say, group session, you'd say there's a fair amount of chatting, but guiding you guys through it, and feedback is always welcome. And also, the more you do this stuff, there can be less chatting of this nature, and say we can start to ramp the tension up a little bit more, okay, and it can become what it already is, strength training, but genuinely you can make this a heavier day, all right? So pushing the foot down through the floor this way, knee that way. You've held that at maybe 30, 40%. And now from there, we're now going to try and pull the foot off the floor. So I'm trying to pull this back this way. If you could see me move, I'd be doing this. So I'd be pulling this way. Hopefully we've got the setup right. And we might start to get the McShakes, some tension through here. And again, I'm going sort of 30, 40%. Think light effort, first set. Just getting used to the stimulus. If you start to cramp up, I would possibly expect that if you've never done this before. But we want to be able to change that. All right, we want more capacity in these tissues so they can handle more load. That cramping is to inhibit movement, to stop us moving there, expressing force there. We're not ready for it quite yet. Then relax, but try and hold this position. So I've just created this pulling effect through here to contract this stuff, to pull me in at a micro level to a tiny little bit more range, load up a little bit more tissue. If you're like, well, this is making a little bit of sense, but I'd like to learn a little bit more, then please feel free. So just collar me if you see me around the box. All right, why this is relevant. From there then, we're going to do another set of that. All right, and we can go just a little bit harder if we want to this time, if we're feeling more confident with it. So from there then, I'm going to take this, so my ankle, and I'm going to start to push it through the floor. Then knee starts to push down through the floor, or that book, whatever you got. And I'm maybe going to about 30-40% to start with now. Sorry, I started to ramble on that first set. I just stuck in that position for a little while. But that is okay. At low intensity, can hold it for a little bit longer. Now start to amp it up again a little bit more. So just play with, like in your head, maybe a 50-60% effort. So a stronger effort, pushing this down into the floor. This. So if you could see me move, it would be this, and it would be this. Really try and drive it from the hip. Hold that. Maybe go up to about 70%, and we'll hold that for another 5 seconds. And now this next contraction, you can squeeze into quicker. All right, that's shortened tissue, so try and pull the foot off the floor. Squeeze into here. Maybe say you're a little bit more here. And you're pulling through here to try and pull this off the floor. And try and keep pulling. Again, maybe that 50-60% effort, it's going to probably feel like a lot more than that. Keep pulling. 2, 1. Then you'd hold. And if you guys want to do another set, you're watching this, pause it now and go through that third set. Which again, if you're confident with it, if it's your first session, I wouldn't advise you go any higher than that 70% sort of effort. All right? We want you to have plenty more left in the tank. Think of it as trying to find the feels. This is a skill, same as any other part of your training. Right, from there then, you could, if you want to, pause now. Do a couple more of those 90-90 switches that we did at the beginning. All right? And then we're going to get stuck into the trail leg in some internal rotation. All right? So, a word on the cramping. So your likelihood is a lot of people cramp the internal rotation, all right? But internal rotation is a fundamental movement of the hip. All right, if we haven't got rotation of the hip at a deep level, like fixed point motion isn't how it happens. It's not like this. Yeah, we need movement at a micro level to create these moments of rotation in the hip and movement to allow loading of tissue. All right, if we get that movement, what we end up doing is we get like a stretch in the capsule, so that deep tissue that surrounds a joint. This feeds into the overlying tissue that feeds into that tissue. You think of all the layers of connective tissue, and then those muscle fibers are within that connective tissue. They are responding to information that they're getting. All right, the better this moves, the better information those muscle fibers get, more gains, isn't it? You know what I mean? So from there, I'm going to think about trying to load this stuff. I'm going to pull pelvis down towards the floor a little bit. From there, you might get I can hear it already, that, ooh, mate, through here, that is you winding up into some internal rotation. All right, again, I would advise spend that 2 minutes passive, just hunting around, say just, maybe some small movements through here, again, so we encourage that movement of the pelvis, rather than a lot of this going on. All right, that is not movement of the hip. That would be a compensation. All right, if I think I'm loading my hip, but I'm going here. All right, let's be mindful with how we load this tissue. So from there then, that is the passive bit, unfortunately. Hold that for 2 minutes-ish. All right, so again, you can pause this now if you want, hold it for another minute. Doesn't have to be precise, but somewhere in that 2 minute region is usually pretty good. And again, not before we're about to throw down. All right, this sort of stuff can be really good for a recovery as well. Some light sets of this. So from there then, I'm going to bring my attention to lower leg and ankle, and I'm going to start to pull it down through the floor. I'm going to start to get a little squeeze at the knee as well. All right, again, if this isn't touching the floor, let's just pop something under here. All right, so we've got something to push into, otherwise that's going to be a lot of stress on this stuff through here. All right, from there then, and again, if you're getting a pinch point at any point of this and it ain't dissipating, then this position isn't for you at the moment. There's other ways that we can train this, okay, that's also telling us, yeah, in terms of movement at the hip, then we want to be addressing that, okay, in terms of long-term function of our hips, all right? So from there, so this is where you can start to self-assess as well when you spend time in positions and move slower. Pulling the foot down through the floor. Squeezing the knee down through the floor. Sorry, I've sold you down the river again, and I cued this about a minute ago. So now I'm squeezing down into the floor about 30-40%. If you've already been holding it for that long, then you can ease off a little bit if you want. Keep that low level isometric. And now you're squeezing, say, through these adductors, AD, which is just being abduction, adduction. So you're in abduction, you're trying to squeeze down into the floor. So if you could see me move, it would be squeezing this way and sweeping that way. Again, let's go sort of 30-40% to start with. Squeezing into that tension and holding it. And then about 5 seconds, we're going to go back the other way. So when I say that, I mean you're going to try and pull this foot off the floor. Feel almost like this winding up through here. If you start to feel this deep in here, lovely. Okay, loading that deep tissue down through here. And keep trying to pull that foot off the floor. Again, if you start to get this irradiation going on through the rest of the body, we'll touch on that more in the next rep, but cool. Keep pulling. And if you just cramped and gone down, chill and come back in and join us next set. So from there then, almost imagine you're letting that tension go. You're not pulling the foot off the floor anymore, or trying to, and you're going to sink back into that stretchy feel for one more set, or you can go 2 more if you want to pause it at the end of this set. So you probably noticed we don't do the long passive hold after the first set. Think of that passive bit that you're probably like, dude, that ain't passive. That is the skill of stretching. So stretching is a skill, and everyone's going to feel this just slightly differently. So I want you guys to try and find the tension roughly in those areas that I'm saying. But that is the skill part of your stretching. Let's find some tension, and then we're going to train it. So from there then, I've loaded up again into that internally rotated position. And we touched on that irradiation cue a minute ago. So as I'm pulling my foot down into the floor, I'm thinking, right, I'm squeezing this way. I'm squeezing back that way with the knee. So this element catches that really deep tissue around the hip. This element starts to capture some of this more superficial stuff, these adductors as well. Bang for your buck, obviously. Then start to squeeze a little bit more. So I'm pulling here, squeezing there. Maybe you think strong through the knee and really try and pull through the foot. Maybe you're at about sort of 60% now, 70%. Hold that for another 5 seconds. And then in 2, 1, you're going to try and squeeze that foot off the floor. No matter how much you look at it, he just starts to shake a little bit. He wants to go, but he ain't really going. Some of you guys might get a little bit of movement. I've got to move to do this. But a little bit of this. All good if you're doing it. We're creating some drive to those internal rotators. We're getting some movement. That's fine. Then try and just pull yourself into this a little bit more so the foot comes back down, but keep that movement. And 2, 1, chill. Nice. So you might give yourself sort of 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then go again for one more set if you want to. So just a quick rewind and do that bit we just did then again. So I would usually, in my own training, it'd be no more than 3 sets. Of what we just did in each position 3 sets. All right, ramping it slowly. So the first set can be nice and long, low tension. Okay, then amp it up a little bit more and less time under tension. And as you ramp it up a little bit more, again a little bit less time under tension. All right, so as you get into that third set, it can be like 15 seconds ramping the tension up. Hold it for another 15, 10 seconds, something like that. And then try and pull off the floor. And remember, you can pull into that second contraction and try and get that tension on quicker. On the word of cramping, think of that. It's not the end of the world in these positions. You're starting to find the tissue, but we haven't got the capacity to handle that much neurological drive to that stuff at the moment. Yeah, that's why the body is inhibiting your ability to hold that position and express force there. Even though it's an isometric like this, yeah? It's backing you out. It wants us to stop. So you can just start to, if you want, tease yourself out of it a little bit. So you might tease yourself out of that internal rotation a bit. But keep the tension there and toy with it. And if it just feels like it's slightly cramping, keep going. If it's tolerable, just keep feeding a bit of tension in there. Start to build the capacity of those tissues. It's only going to serve you better and better and better as you pull into those deep areas of your squats and lunges. Your body will know where you are in space, and that's when you get more neurological drive to those tissues in the bottom of the lunge or the squat, and you've got access to more tissue to get you out of there over and over again. So you start to share the load through more tissue. You're not just taxing the same tissue and over and over again, because like you can feel probably now, you've got limited access to that stuff around the hip. Okay, so this is why we do this stuff, is healthier tissue, more responsive tissue, stronger tissue, but access to more tissue. Good mobility work is strength work. All right, so let me know how you get on with that. Give it a go ski. Any questions, coolio. And I would advise that, if you can do that once a day, what we just went through then, or maybe you do internal rotation one day of both sides, and then you do external rotation of both sides another day. Cool. But some consistent inputs with this stuff is where the change is at. And those hip rotations we did are gold. If you're not feeling a pinch at any point, if you're feeling a pinch, try and make the rotation smaller. If you still feel a pinch, that is a valid finding. You're asking your hip to do hip stuff, and it can't do hip stuff too well at the moment. Maybe there's a lack of room in the capsule. That's why we're getting that pinching. But that is a finding, and it allows you then to, address that. Okay, so again, you can give me a nudge about that if you want. All right. Yeah, I hope that is good, guys. That is some PAILS rails stuff here. PAILS is progressive angular isometric loading, if you want to know. And rails is that shortened side, regressive angular isometric loading. Okay, remember the PAILS you bring on slowly, lengthen tissue, contracting that. The rails you can squeeze into that quicker. That's why you start to cramp. We're looking for more responsiveness from the tissue. All right, guys. I hope that vid helps. And yeah, any questions about that stuff, fire away.